Unfaithful Heart. Chapter 1. The Silent Distance. Emily Carter sat by the kitchen window, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly as the rain tapped gently against the glass. Outside, the world was a dull gray, clouds heavy, sky blank. Inside, the silence between her and David had become a familiar noise. They'd been married for 7 years. 7 quiet, measured years. At first, their life had been like something out of a picture book, laughing over late-night takeout, lazy Sunday mornings wrapped in sheets, little road trips to nowhere. But over time, life got louder, and they got quieter. David had thrown himself into work. Emily had drifted into loneliness. She stared across the kitchen at the clock. 7:42 a.m. David would come downstairs any second now, briefcase in hand, tie already knotted, eyes on his phone instead of her. Just as expected, his footsteps came down the stairs, precise and businesslike. "Morning," Emily said softly. "Morning," David replied without looking up. He grabbed a protein bar from the pantry, shoved it into his coat pocket, then poured himself a cup of black coffee. No sugar. No cream. Just like his personality these days. "You'll be home late again?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Probably," he said. "We've got quarterly reports due this week." She gave a faint nod, biting her tongue. There was always something due, always something that pulled him away. He kissed her on the forehead, but it felt mechanical, like a habit long past meaning. The front door closed. And just like that, Emily was alone again. By 10 a.m., she was walking into Blake and Monroe Advertising, her workplace of the past 2 years. Her heels clicked on the polished floor, her shoulder bag hung lightly at her side. The office was sleek, modern, creative, but what made it bearable was her boss, Ethan Blake. Ethan wasn't just her boss, he was magnetic. Charismatic. The kind of man who listened when she spoke, remembered the little things, smiled in a way that made her feel seen. "Morning, Emily," Ethan said as she passed his glass office door. He stood up from his desk, buttoning his blazer. She stopped and smiled. "Morning, Ethan." He tilted his head slightly, as though studying her expression. "You okay?" She hesitated. "Yeah. Just tired." "Rough morning?" She nodded, a small, polite lie hiding a deeper ache. "Something like that." He smiled gently. "Come by later. We'll go over the Taylor account revisions." "Of course." She walked on, her heart beating slightly faster. Emily spent the next few hours at her desk, immersed in client briefs and design notes, but her mind drifted. She found herself thinking about Ethan's eyes, the way they studied her like she mattered. The way he said her name like it was important. David never said her name anymore. Not really. Not with any meaning. By lunchtime, she and Ethan were seated in the glass conference room going over ad copy, but the conversation veered. "So," Ethan said, tapping a pen lightly on the table, "what's really going on?" She looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "You've been off lately." "Not bad, just distracted." Emily sighed and leaned back slightly. "I guess I've been thinking a lot." "About?" She paused, debating how much to say. Ethan wasn't just her boss, he was kind, attentive, but this was still work. Still. "My marriage," she finally said. "It's not terrible. But it's not alive either. It's like we're roommates now. And I don't even think he notices." Ethan's eyes softened. "That's hard." Emily nodded. "I didn't get married to feel alone." There was a beat of silence. Then Ethan said quietly, "You deserve more than that." She looked at him. There was no agenda in his face, no manipulation, just a man telling her what he saw. And for some reason that made her chest tighten. "Thanks," she whispered. That evening, David came home past 9 p.m. Emily had reheated dinner. He barely noticed. She sat across from him as he scrolled through emails. "How was work?" she asked. "Busy," he replied. "I talked to Ethan today. He's giving me a lead role on the Henderson project." That's good, David said, not looking up. Emily pushed her food around on her plate. She used to share everything with him. Her thoughts. Her dreams. Now it felt like she was speaking into a well. After dinner, David disappeared into his home office. Emily went to bed alone. And as she lay there in the dark, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. Hey. I know it's not my place, but I just wanted to say, I hope you're okay. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. She stared at the message for a moment. Then she typed back. Thank you? That means more than you know. She hit send. And something shifted. The next day, Ethan brought her coffee. Medium roast, 2 sugars, oat milk, he said with a smile. You remembered? Of course I did. They talked more that day. Laughed more. And in one small moment, barely a brush, his hand grazed hers. It felt electric. Emily pulled back, heart thudding. Ethan didn't push. He just gave her a look that said, I'm here. I'm patient. That night, David didn't come home until midnight. He didn't notice her red eyes. Or the way she flinched when he got into bed. And he didn't see the way her heart was already turning somewhere else. Chapter 2: The Whisper of Something New. Emily hadn't been able to sleep. Her thoughts had raced all night, bouncing between guilt and a kind of yearning she hadn't felt in years. Ethan's message had been simple, kind, but it lingered in her mind like a melody she couldn't stop humming. The next morning, David left early. No goodbye. No glance back. She stood at the kitchen sink, watching him drive away, her hands trembling just slightly. It was strange, how her heart no longer ached over his coldness. It just felt numb. Like something inside had been quietly shutting down for years. At work, Ethan greeted her with that same warm smile. The office bustled with energy, clients coming and going, designers arguing over fonts, interns scrambling with coffee trays. But for Emily, the world seemed to blur every time Ethan looked at her. You okay? He asked again as she passed his door. She hesitated, then stepped inside. I don't know, she admitted. Everything feels out of balance. He closed his laptop and leaned back. What do you mean? Emily sat down across from him. It's like I wake up and don't recognize my life. I look at my husband and wonder when he stopped being mine. When I stopped being someone to him. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened, really listened. Sometimes, she continued, her voice quieter, I feel like I'm disappearing. You're not invisible, Emily, he said gently. Not here. Not to me. Their eyes locked. Something flickered. She looked away quickly, heart racing. I shouldn't be talking about this with you. Why not? Because it's personal. And you're my boss. And married women shouldn't. He cut her off, gently but firmly. Shouldn't feel what? Seen? Valued? That's not wrong, Emily. Silence settled between them again, thick with unsaid things. Over the next few weeks, things shifted, subtly, slowly, but undeniably. Emily and Ethan began spending more time together, first on work, then coffee breaks, then walks to their cars. Little by little, boundaries softened. He made her laugh again. He noticed when she wore something new. He complimented her ideas during meetings in ways David never did. One afternoon, during a late strategy session, Ethan leaned over her shoulder to point something out on her screen. His breath was warm on her neck. Their heads were close, too close. Her pulse thundered. She turned to look at him. He looked at her lips. Time paused. For a moment, it felt like gravity pulled them toward each other. The air between them cracked with tension. But then Emily stood up abruptly. I should go. Emily, he began, but she was already walking out of the room. That night, she lay awake beside David. He was snoring softly, phone still in hand, work emails glowing on the screen. Emily turned her face toward the ceiling, eyes wet. She felt like she was standing at a cliff's edge, looking down at something she both feared and longed for. What was worse, falling, or staying stuck? A week later, everything changed. It was a Friday night. David had cancelled their anniversary dinner, something about a late investor call. Emily sat alone at the restaurant for 20 minutes before quietly leaving. She didn't go home. She went to the office. Ethan was there, working late, just as she knew he would be. He looked up, surprised. "Emily?" She didn't speak at first. She walked in, closed the door behind her, and stood there, hands shaking slightly. "He forgot again," she said quietly. "Our anniversary. I sat at the restaurant alone." Ethan stood. "I'm so sorry. I'm tired," she whispered, "of feeling like I don't exist." He walked toward her, slow, cautious. "You do exist. You shine, Emily. He's just too blind to see it." Tears welled in her eyes. Ethan reached out, his thumb brushing her cheek. And then, without another word, their lips met. It was soft at first, hesitant. But then it deepened, years of loneliness, suppressed feelings, and longing crashing into a kiss that felt like air after drowning. Emily pulled back, breathless. "I shouldn't have." He held her face gently. "It's okay. I don't know what I'm doing." "Then don't do it alone." The next morning, Emily didn't feel guilt. She felt alive. And that terrified her more than anything. Chapter 3: The Crack in the Mirror. The following Monday, Emily stood before her bathroom mirror, curling her hair with unusual care. Her hands moved with purpose, but her mind was foggy. The reflection staring back at her looked like someone she hadn't seen in years, eyes alive, cheeks flushed. And yet, beneath that glow, there was a crack. A crack shaped like guilt. David had barely noticed her that weekend. He spent most of it locked in his office, pacing during conference calls, scribbling figures into a yellow legal pad. The only real words they'd exchanged were about the groceries being delivered late. He hadn't asked where she'd been Friday night. He hadn't cared. Emily touched her lips with her fingers, the memory of Ethan's kiss still lingering like an invisible bruise. This wasn't who she was. But she also wasn't who she used to be. At work, Ethan acted as if nothing had happened. He smiled at her politely during the morning meeting, tossed her a comment about a marketing pitch, and avoided any lingering eye contact. It both relieved her and hurt her. During their lunch break, she followed him to the rooftop garden, usually empty during midday. "Ethan," she called gently. He turned, his smile soft but unreadable. "Hey. We need to talk." He nodded. "I figured." Emily leaned against the railing, looking out at the skyline. The wind whipped her hair back from her face. "I don't regret what happened," she began. "But I'm scared." He moved beside her but didn't touch her. "So am I." She glanced at him. "Then why didn't you say anything this morning? Act like it was nothing?" "Because I didn't want to pressure you. You've got a life, Emily. A marriage." She exhaled shakily. "A marriage in name only." They stood in silence for a long beat. "I haven't felt seen in years," she said. "Until you." Ethan's voice was low. "You're more than seen. You're unforgettable." Her heart ached at the words. "So what do we do now?" He looked at her with surprising calm. "We figure it out. Together. One step at a time." The following days were a blur. They didn't cross any physical lines again, but the emotional intimacy deepened. They texted late into the night, shared small secrets over coffee, laughed in a way that felt sacred. It was both beautiful and terrifying. And David remained oblivious. One evening, as Emily was setting the table for dinner, David came home later than usual. He tossed his briefcase down, kissed her forehead absently, and went straight to his laptop. She watched him for a moment. "You're late." "Traffic," he muttered. "You said you'd be home by 7. He didn't look up. "Well, I wasn't." She sat across from him, food untouched. "Do you even notice me anymore?" Now he looked up, brow furrowed. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one." He sighed and rubbed his temple. I'm working, Em. This isn't the time. It's never the time, she said quietly. His voice grew sharper. Are we really doing this now? Over dinner? I'm not even sure we're doing this at all anymore, she replied. David stared at her, stunned. Where is this coming from? From years of silence. From being treated like a roommate. You're being dramatic. She stood up, heart pounding. I'm being honest. He scoffed and turned back to his screen. Maybe you should talk to your friends about this. Or your therapist. I don't have the energy. That night, she slept on the couch. The next day, Ethan found her in the supply room, wiping tears off her cheek. Emily? He whispered. She tried to wave him off, but he closed the door gently behind them. What happened? She broke. All the pressure, the confusion, the ache, she let it pour out. Ethan held her, rubbing her back as she cried into his chest. I feel like I'm drowning, she whispered. And no one notices. I notice, he said. She looked up at him. I'm so afraid of making the wrong choice. There's no right way to feel, he said. There's only your truth. By the end of that week, they crossed the line again. It happened in Ethan's apartment. He had forgotten his phone at home and asked her to stop by after work with it. She hesitated, but then drove over. They talked. Laughed. Ate leftover Thai food on his couch. And then he kissed her again. This time, either of them pulled away. They made love slowly, gently, like two people trying to rewrite the past with every touch. When it was over, Emily lay beside him, fingers tangled with his. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. But as she drove home that night, her heart sank. The lights of her house glowed through the windows like eyes watching her. David was asleep on the couch, TV playing some late-night rerun. She stood at the door and stared at him. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. And yet, the worst part wasn't what she had done. It was that she didn't regret it. Chapter 4: Lines That Blur. Emily sat at her kitchen table, nursing a mug of lukewarm coffee, staring into the swirl of cream that no longer mixed quite right. The house was quiet. David had left early for work, per usual. No goodbye. Not even a glance. Her mind was still in Ethan's apartment, wrapped in his sheets, his scent lingering on her skin like a secret tattoo. The warmth of his embrace stayed with her, but so did the guilt. She had always thought of infidelity as a sudden, violent betrayal, something loud and cruel. But her affair had crept in softly, gently, like rain soaking into dry ground. It felt more like healing than harm. And yet, she was still someone's wife. Her ring glinted under the kitchen light, heavy on her finger. A symbol of a promise long faded. She slipped it off. At work, she found herself walking differently. Standing taller. Laughing easier. Her colleagues noticed the shift, though none said anything aloud. Except Lauren from HR, who leaned in during a coffee break and said with a knowing smile, "Whatever you're doing lately, keep doing it. You're glowing." Emily smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Ethan kept his distance professionally, but the way his gaze lingered told her everything. Their affair remained hidden in coded glances, subtle touches in passing, and late-night texts that bordered on poetry. She hadn't felt this alive in years. Still, she was torn. One evening, David surprised her by coming home early. He stood in the doorway with takeout in hand, Thai food, her favorite. "I thought we could eat together for once," he said. She blinked in confusion. "Okay." They sat at the table, picking at noodles and spring rolls. David cleared his throat. "I know things have been rough. I haven't been present." Emily stared at him, uncertain of where this was going. "I've been buried in work, trying to get promoted. I thought if I could provide more, you'd be happy." She looked down. "You never asked me what I really wanted." He winced. "You're right. I didn't." There was a long pause. "Are we too far gone?" he asked. She wanted to lie. To say no. To say they could fix things. But her silence spoke louder than any words. David sat back, eyes tired. Is there someone else? Emily felt her throat tighten. He nodded slowly. I see, she whispered. It wasn't planned. I figured. His voice was flat. He didn't ask who. He didn't yell. He just stood up, carried his plate to the sink, and said, I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. That night, Emily lay in her bed, heart hammering, tears wetting her pillow. The silence of the house felt heavier than ever. What had she done? What was she doing? She had broken something, and she didn't know if it could be repaired. The next morning, Ethan found her in the elevator. They were alone for 10 floors. She didn't speak. Neither did he. But when the doors opened, he touched her hand briefly before walking away. It was enough to steady her heart. Later that day, he sent her a message. You don't have to explain. I'm here. Whatever you need. She replied. I don't know what I need. But I know I feel more myself with you than I ever did with him. That night she didn't go home. She went to Ethan's apartment. They cooked dinner together, pasta with wine, jazz humming low in the background. It felt domestic, normal, almost too easy. This is dangerous, she murmured. He looked at her from across the kitchen island. I know. But it feels right. I know that too. They made love on the floor, on the couch, tangled in blankets and laughter. They didn't talk about the future. Not yet. But something was growing between them, something deeper than lust, stronger than guilt. Hope. Back at home, David was unraveling in quiet ways. He stopped shaving. Started drinking beer with breakfast. The house grew cluttered, like it was grieving, too. One night, Emily came home to find him sitting in the dark, TV off, just staring. You could have just told me you were unhappy, he said. She stood in the doorway, unsure of what to say. I would have let you go with dignity, he added. But now, all I feel is shame. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. But you did. Silence. I'm filing for divorce, he said finally. Emily nodded. Okay. He stood and walked past her. She didn't follow. Chapter 5: The Quiet Aftermath. The word divorce lingered in the air like smoke, faint, bitter, but undeniable. Emily stood in the hallway of her once home, feeling both weightless and burdened. For years she had wished David would see her, really see her. Now he finally had, and all it took was her breaking his heart. In the days that followed, David withdrew from everything. He came home late, slept on the couch, and barely spoke. But unlike before, Emily didn't beg for connection. She had none to give. The process was surprisingly civil. No screaming matches. No lawyers clawing at one another. Just papers. Ink. A quiet end. But what wasn't quiet was the storm inside Emily. She had chosen a new path, but the guilt still echoed in her mind. Ethan offered her a haven. His apartment slowly became hers too, an extra toothbrush in the bathroom, her books next to his on the shelves, her cardigan tossed over his reading chair. They weren't official. They weren't loud. But they were. Something. I never asked for this, she told him one night. I know. I wasn't looking to fall in love. He ran his hand through her hair. But you did. She nodded. Yeah. He smiled faintly. So did I. Still, the transition wasn't seamless. People noticed. Her coworkers whispered in break rooms. A few cold stares. An awkward silence when she walked in the room. The kind of judgment that didn't need to be spoken. Lauren from HR stopped sitting with her at lunch. One afternoon, she overheard two assistants talking by the printer. And now she's shacked up with the boss. Classic. She probably slept her way into that project lead position. Emily didn't confront them. She didn't cry either. She just walked out, bought a coffee, and called Ethan. Can I come over tonight? Always. David, meanwhile, had started seeing someone. Emily found out from a mutual friend. Apparently, it was a woman from his gym, young, soft-spoken, a yoga instructor named Lily. When Emily saw a photo of them together on social media, she stared at it longer than she meant to. It didn't hurt the way she thought it would. It was more like acceptance. They were both moving on. Separately. Maybe that was okay. A few weeks later, she and David met at a neutral cafe to finalize some paperwork. The atmosphere was stiff, but not hostile. He looked better, clean-shaven, rested, even smiling politely. "How's work?" he asked. "Busy. Yours?" "Same. I got that promotion, by the way." "That's great, David." A pause. "And I heard you're seeing someone." She nodded. He nodded too. "I guess we both found what we were looking for. Just not in each other. Maybe we never were meant to. Maybe." They didn't say sorry. There wasn't a point. They just signed, stood, and went their separate ways. That night, Emily returned to Ethan's place. Her place now, in so many ways. He was cooking dinner, barefoot, wearing an apron that read, "Kiss the chef." She laughed. He turned to her. "Everything okay?" She walked over and wrapped her arms around him from behind. "Yeah. I think it is." They ate dinner with wine, watched an old movie on the couch, and fell asleep with the window open, summer air brushing against their skin. For the first time in years, Emily didn't feel like she was running from something. She was simply living. But love doesn't erase the past, it only makes room for healing. There were still moments that hurt. She had dreams of her wedding day that left her waking in tears. She felt guilty when she laughed too hard around Ethan, like joy was something she hadn't yet earned. One afternoon, she drove past the house she and David once shared. It had a "for sale" sign on the lawn. Empty now. Like a memory. She didn't stop. She didn't need to. A few months later, Ethan surprised her. They were hiking in a quiet park just outside the city, golden leaves crunching beneath their boots, the sky a soft gray. At the summit, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emily froze. "Ethan!" He opened it slowly. Inside was a simple ring, delicate, silver, nothing flashy. "I know this isn't traditional. And I know we didn't start the way most people do." She blinked back tears. "But if you want it, I want to build a life with you. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real." She stared at him, her heart thundering. "Yes," she whispered. He slipped the ring onto her finger, her right hand, not the left. Not yet. They weren't rushing. They were just ready. Chapter 6: New Foundations. The ring wasn't a promise of perfection. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a beginning, something fragile but real, like spring grass after a long winter. Emily wore it proudly but quietly. She didn't make a social media announcement. She didn't flaunt it at work. It wasn't about validation. It was about Ethan. About them. They moved in officially that fall, finding a new apartment with high ceilings, big windows, and just enough room for two people who had lived a lot of life. They painted the bedroom a warm sage green. She picked the curtains. He picked the coffee maker. It was their compromise, their harmony. Ethan worked late most nights, but when he was home, he was present. Emily had started freelancing more, doing creative work for clients she actually liked. The days had rhythm now. Predictability. Peace. But peace, Emily discovered, didn't always mean happiness. Sometimes it meant quiet reflection. Sometimes it meant confronting the parts of herself she had ignored for years. One rainy evening, curled up on the couch, Ethan asked, "Do you ever miss him?" She didn't pretend to misunderstand. "David." She looked at her cup of tea. "Not him. But the safety. The certainty." Ethan nodded. "That makes sense. Do you ever think I'm a terrible person? For what I did?" He turned to her. "No. I think you were deeply unhappy. And brave enough to make a painful choice. she exhaled. I just never want to hurt you like that. He smiled softly. Then don't. But if you ever feel like we're drifting, talk to me. Promise? Promise. They kissed gently, a moment of mutual understanding. That winter, Emily received an unexpected call. Her father was in the hospital. She hadn't spoken to her parents much since the divorce. They had been disappointed. Old-fashioned. Embarrassed, maybe? Ethan drove her 6 hours to her hometown. He waited in the lobby while she sat beside her father's hospital bed, holding his weathered hand. They talked. Not just about the surgery, or the health issues, but about everything. About her childhood. About her marriage. About how her mom had cried when she found out the truth. We thought you were making a mistake, her father admitted. But maybe staying would have been the bigger one. It wasn't a full apology, but it was enough. After her father was discharged, Emily stayed a few days to help her mother organize things. Ethan returned to the city for work, texting her updates and pictures of their dog's ridiculous sleeping positions. One night, her mother knocked on her childhood bedroom door. He makes you happy? Emily smiled. Yeah. He really does. Her mom nodded. Then I guess we can get over how it all started. As long as it ends right. Back in the city, life resumed its quiet beat. Emily and Ethan planned a small engagement dinner. Just a few friends. Candles. Laughter. Even David sent a text. I heard. Congratulations. I hope he gives you everything you were looking for. She stared at the message for a long time. Then replied, Thank you. I hope you found peace too. No more. No less. Chapter 7, Echoes and Edges. Spring came late that year, hesitant and shy, like a guest unsure of their welcome. The city, once dull and gray, started blooming again, small pink buds along the sidewalks, bursts of green creeping through fences. Emily and Ethan took long walks on weekends, hand in hand, weaving through farmers' markets and book fairs. I like this version of you, Ethan said one afternoon, watching her examine a bunch of wildflowers. What version is that? Light. Like you're finally breathing fully. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and smiled. That's what love is supposed to do, right? Not suffocate you. Not put you in a cage. He nodded. Exactly. At work, Emily noticed a shift too. She walked into rooms with more certainty. She pitched ideas with confidence. People listened. Some of the same colleagues who used to whisper behind her back now sought her input in meetings. The scandal had faded, and in its place, something stronger had grown: respect. Her boss, Maria, approached her one Friday. We're thinking of promoting you to creative lead. The role's expanding, and your name keeps coming up. Emily blinked. Really? Maria smiled. You've earned it. Your work, your leadership, people trust you now. Trust. That word felt heavy and precious. I'd love the opportunity, she said. But change always came with complications. David resurfaced, at a conference, of all places. She was attending as part of her new leadership role, and he was one of the guest speakers. Their eyes met across the lobby. He approached her with a cautious smile. Didn't expect to see you here. Same, she replied, keeping her tone neutral. They chatted briefly, small talk, professional pleasantries. But the undercurrent was undeniable. A shared past neither of them could erase. You look good, he said finally. Thanks. Life's been calmer. He hesitated. Do you ever wonder, what if we'd met under different circumstances? Emily shook her head gently. But we didn't. And that's okay. David nodded. You seem happy. I am. It wasn't a lie. It wasn't the whole truth either. But it was enough. That night, Emily called Ethan. Ran into David today. There was a pause. Then, how did it feel? Like a ghost. Familiar but no longer haunting. He exhaled. I'm glad. I told him I was happy. And I meant it. Mostly. Mostly? She hesitated. Sometimes I still feel guilty. Like there's a part of me waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like I don't fully deserve this. Ethan's voice softened. You don't have to punish yourself forever. We're not the sum of our worst moments. Her eyes welled. Thank you for reminding me. Anytime. That's kind of my job now, right? Fiancé privileges. She laughed, wiping her tears. You're annoying. But you love me. Yeah. I really do. As the conference ended, and she boarded her train back home, Emily stared out the window. The past was still part of her, like scars beneath the surface. But it no longer defined her. The woman she was now, stronger, kinder, a little wiser, was forged through fire and choices. And love. Real love. One that grew patiently, without rushing, without needing to conquer. She held her phone, scrolling through photos of her and Ethan, their first apartment, their weekend hikes, the silly selfies. Her future wasn't perfect. But it was hers. And that, she decided, was enough. Chapter 8: Forgiveness in Bloom. The train pulled into the station just as dusk painted the sky in hues of lavender and orange. Emily stepped onto the platform, her suitcase trailing behind her, the rhythm of its wheels echoing the beat of her heart. Home was only a few blocks away, yet she walked slowly, drinking in the fading light and the warmth of early spring. Ethan was waiting on the porch, coffee in hand, wearing a cozy sweater and a look of quiet contentment. He stood when he saw her and met her halfway down the walk. Missed you, he said, wrapping his arms around her. Me too. They didn't speak for a while, just stood together as the sun dipped below the horizon. Inside, their home felt warmer than usual, scented with lemon and rosemary from a candle burning in the kitchen. Over dinner, they talked about everything and nothing. The conference, the weather, a new recipe he tried and burned. Laughter filled the air again, unforced and free. It felt like a page had turned. Like they were writing a new chapter together. The next few weeks were a blend of professional triumph and personal grounding. Emily accepted the promotion and took to the role with enthusiasm. Ethan supported her every step of the way, helping her rehearse presentations, leaving encouraging notes in her laptop bag. One evening, after a long day, she returned home to find Ethan setting up a picnic in the backyard. Twinkling fairy lights hung in the trees, and soft music played from a speaker. What's all this? She asked. Just a Tuesday surprise. Thought we should celebrate you. They lay on a blanket, wine glasses in hand, surrounded by laughter and stars. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt deserving of joy. You know, she said, her voice soft, I used to think love had to be dramatic to be real. That if it wasn't breaking you open, it wasn't deep enough. And now? She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. Now I know the real kind of love is quiet. Steady. It builds you instead of breaking you. Weeks passed. Emily found herself in a rhythm, working, building, healing. But guilt still knocked sometimes. Especially when she least expected it. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered into the kitchen and found Ethan reading at the table. He looked up. Can't sleep? She shook her head. Still carrying it? He asked gently. She nodded. Even now, I wonder if I should have walked away from you. Given you the space to find someone who didn't hurt you. He stood and walked to her, taking her hands. But I chose you. Every day I still do. And you've changed. I see it. You've grown from the hurt, not run from it. That matters. But what if I fail you again? Then we work through it. Together. She leaned into him, tears warm against her cheeks. Thank you? For loving me even when I didn't love myself. That's what love does. In late spring, Emily's team won a major award for their campaign work. At the ceremony, she stood on stage, lights in her eyes, applause ringing in her ears. She thought of David briefly, not with longing, but with gratitude. For what he taught her. For what she learned. When she returned to her seat, Ethan was beaming. "Proud doesn't even begin to cover it," he whispered. Emily squeezed his hand. "We built this life together." As the crowd dispersed and the night grew quiet, she realized something. The past was a bridge, not a chain. It connected her to now, but it didn't bind her. Her story wasn't one of betrayal. It was one of becoming. Chapter 9: A Future Worth Fighting For. Summer settled over the city like a warm blanket, bringing with it longer days and the scent of blooming jasmine. Emily found herself immersed in work she loved, in a marriage reborn, and in a self she was finally beginning to accept. Still, there were moments when doubt tried to sneak in, when the echo of past mistakes would whisper in her ear. But they were fewer now, and quieter. At the office, her team had become like a second family. Her leadership was admired, her ideas respected. Even David, once a looming figure in her life, was now a distant colleague. He had transferred to the firm's European division, and their interactions had become rare and professional. When they did speak, it was brief, courteous, and completely devoid of personal undertones. That chapter, it seemed, had truly closed. One afternoon, while reviewing a project in her glass-walled office, Emily spotted a bouquet on her desk. Peonies, her favorite. A note accompanied them. "For everything you are, and everything you're becoming. E." She smiled, tears prickling her eyes. Ethan never needed grand gestures. His quiet, thoughtful ways spoke volumes. That evening, they sat on their porch watching fireflies blink like stars in the grass. A comfortable silence stretched between them until Ethan said, "Have you ever thought about a fresh start? Somewhere new? Just the two of us?" Emily looked at him, surprised. "Like moving?" He nodded. "Yeah. New city. New memories. Clean slate." She considered it. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. But mostly, it was freeing. Maybe it's time. They started researching cities together, places with good career opportunities, cozy neighborhoods, and coffee shops where they could spend lazy Sunday mornings. Eventually, they settled on Portland. The decision felt right. Intentional. Their last few weeks in the city were filled with dinners with friends, farewell brunches, and slow walks through familiar streets. Emily made peace with her past with each step. She visited the cafe where she first met David, not out of nostalgia but to remind herself of how far she'd come. Their new house was a charming craftsman-style home with a garden Ethan immediately started planting with herbs and wildflowers. Emily's new office had a window view of a small park, and she brought in art and books that reflected who she was now. On their first weekend in Portland, they went hiking along a wooded trail. Halfway up, they paused at a lookout point. Below them stretched a valley of green, dotted with homes and bathed in golden light. "It's beautiful," Emily said, catching her breath. Ethan nodded, wrapping his arm around her waist. "So are you." She laughed. "I'm sweaty and covered in mosquito bites. Still beautiful. Because I see you now. All of you." Emily leaned into him. She still didn't have all the answers. She still had work to do, on herself, on their relationship, on the dreams they were yet to chase. But for the first time, she felt capable of that work. Together, they had walked through fire and come out holding hands. Later that night, lying in bed beneath soft sheets and an open window, Emily whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Ethan brushed her hair back. "Thank you for not staying the same." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Inside, two hearts beat steady and strong. They weren't perfect. But they were honest. And they were in love. That, Emily thought as sleep pulled her under, was more than enough. Chapter 10: A Future Worth Fighting For. Summer settled over the city like a warm blanket, bringing with it longer days and the scent of blooming jasmine. Emily found herself immersed in work she loved, in a marriage reborn, and in a self she was finally beginning to accept. Still, there were moments when doubt tried to sneak in, when the echo of past mistakes would whisper in her ear. But they were fewer now, and quieter. At the office, Her team had become like a second family. Her leadership was admired, her ideas respected. Even David, once a looming figure in her life, was now a distant colleague. He had transferred to the firm's European division, and their interactions had become rare and professional. When they did speak, it was brief, courteous, and completely devoid of personal undertones. That chapter, it seemed, had truly closed. One afternoon, while reviewing a project in her glass-walled office, Emily spotted a bouquet on her desk. Peonies, her favorite. A note accompanied them. For everything you are, and everything you're becoming. E. She smiled, tears prickling her eyes. Ethan never needed grand gestures. His quiet, thoughtful ways spoke volumes. That evening, they sat on their porch watching fireflies blink like stars in the grass. A comfortable silence stretched between them until Ethan said, "Have you ever thought about a fresh start? Somewhere new? Just the two of us." Emily looked at him, surprised. "Like moving?" He nodded. "Yeah. New city. New memories. Clean slate." She considered it. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. But mostly, it was freeing. Maybe it's time. They started researching cities together, places with good career opportunities, cozy neighborhoods, and coffee shops where they could spend lazy Sunday mornings. Eventually, they settled on Portland. The decision felt right. Intentional. Their last few weeks in the city were filled with dinners with friends, farewell brunches, and slow walks through familiar streets. Emily made peace with her past with each step. She visited the cafe where she first met David, not out of nostalgia but to remind herself of how far she'd come. Their new house was a charming craftsman-style home with a garden Ethan immediately started planting with herbs and wildflowers. Emily's new office had a window view of a small park, and she brought in art and books that reflected who she was now. On their first weekend in Portland, they went hiking along a wooded trail. Halfway up, they paused at a lookout point. Below them stretched a valley of green, dotted with homes and bathed in golden light. "It's beautiful," Emily said, catching her breath. Ethan nodded, wrapping his arm around her waist. "So are you." She laughed. "I'm sweaty and covered in mosquito bites. Still beautiful. Because I see you now. All of you." Emily leaned into him. She still didn't have all the answers. She still had work to do, on herself, on their relationship, on the dreams they were yet to chase. But for the first time, she felt capable of that work. Together, they had walked through fire and come out holding hands. Later that night, lying in bed beneath soft sheets and an open window, Emily whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Ethan brushed her hair back. "Thank you for not staying the same." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Inside, two hearts beat steady and strong. They weren't perfect. But they were honest. And they were in love. That, Emily thought as sleep pulled her under, was more than enough. Chapter 1: The Quiet Before. Madison Carter stood in the kitchen, fingers wrapped around a coffee mug that had long gone cold. Outside, the lawn was freshly mowed, the trees trimmed neatly, and the morning sun peeked through the clouds. Everything looked just as it should. Normal. Peaceful. Routine. But inside her, there was a quiet ache she couldn't describe anymore. The silence between her and Daniel had grown louder than any argument could have. Daniel sat at the breakfast table, reading the Wall Street Journal as if it were scripture. He looked the part, black slacks, iron shirt, watch gleaming on his wrist. He was successful, intelligent, reliable. And yet, completely absent. "I'll be working late," he said, still behind his paper. Madison didn't even flinch. "Okay," she replied, not expecting a follow-up. There never was one. She stared at him a few seconds longer, wondering how they had become strangers under the same roof. When had his eyes stopped seeing her? Chapter 2. A new presence. The office was a welcome distraction. Madison worked as a senior graphic designer at a mid-size marketing firm in Indianapolis, known more for its long hours than its creative freedom. But today, there was a buzz in the air. Ethan Blake, the newly appointed creative director, was arriving. "Apparently he's some kind of genius," said Jen, Madison's work friend. "Worked at 3 agencies in LA. Now he's here, God knows why." Madison didn't care much. New bosses came and went. She'd learned to keep her head down and focus on deliverables. But when Ethan finally walked into the creative wing, everything shifted just a little. He wasn't what she expected. Tall, clean-cut but casual, with eyes that made too much contact. He wore a confident smirk like it belonged there. "Morning, everyone," he said. "I'm Ethan. No titles, just names. I like collaboration, not commands." When his eyes met Madison's, he held the look for just a moment too long. She felt it. Something between curiosity and a flicker of danger. Chapter 3: Sparks and Small Moments. Over the next few weeks, Ethan proved different. He actually read reports, gave thoughtful feedback, and remembered names. But what Madison noticed most was how he listened, to her, especially. "You always bury the best part of your design at the bottom," he told her once in a one-on-one. "Why?" She shrugged. "Never thought it mattered." "It does," he said. "It's honest. It's the only part that feels like you." No one had said anything like that to her in years. It started with innocent things. A glance across the meeting table. A lingering compliment. A shared laugh in the elevator. But it grew. One Friday evening, as they worked late on a pitch, Ethan looked at her and said, "You know, I don't think your husband appreciates what he has." The words landed like a bomb in the quiet office. She looked up, stunned. "Excuse me? I'm sorry," he said quickly. "That was out of line." But she didn't tell him he was wrong. Chapter 4: Lines Blur. Madison didn't sleep that night. Ethan's words echoed in her mind. "I don't think your husband appreciates what he has." Daniel came home late, past midnight, and didn't even notice she was awake. No kiss. No hello. He just undressed, got into bed, and fell asleep beside her as if she were invisible. The next morning, Madison called in sick. She wasn't sick, not in the traditional sense, but her heart felt like it was carrying too much. She sat in bed all morning, watching the ceiling fan spin. By noon, her phone buzzed. "Ethan, you okay? I noticed you weren't in." "Madison, just needed a day." "Ethan, fair enough. If you ever need to talk." "I mean it." She stared at the message, rereading it. He hadn't crossed the line again, but he was there, just on the edge. And she didn't stop him. Chapter 5: The First Touch. Things didn't explode all at once, it was a slow burn. Ethan didn't pressure her. Instead, he became something Daniel hadn't been in a long time: present. He'd bring her coffee in the mornings. He'd ask about her weekend and really listen. When they worked late together, they laughed like friends, sometimes too loudly. One night, as they were walking out of the building after finishing a pitch presentation, it started to rain. Madison didn't have an umbrella. "Here," Ethan said, stepping closer, his suit jacket raised above both their heads. "Thanks," she said, laughing. "You're gonna get soaked. I've been through worse." When they reached her car, she turned to thank him again, and that's when it happened. A pause. A silence heavy with meaning. And then Ethan leaned in and kissed her. Just once. Brief. Warm. Electric. Madison didn't pull away. She didn't stop it. When it ended, she whispered, "This can't happen." He looked at her, eyes serious. "Then why did it?" Chapter 6: The Fall. The next few days were a blur. Madison couldn't think straight. She replayed the kiss 100 times in her mind. She tried to focus at work, tried to act normal around Daniel, but it was useless. She met Ethan again the following Friday in his office. He had closed the door. "Look," he said quietly, "I won't make excuses. I wanted to kiss you. I still want to. But only if you do too." Madison felt breathless. "I don't want to be that person," she whispered. You already are, Ethan said gently. And so am I. The next thing she knew, she was in his arms, her body betraying her guilt, her lips meeting his again, and this time, it didn't stop at a kiss. Chapter 7, Guilt's Whisper. Madison woke in her own bed Saturday morning, but her body still remembered the night before. The feel of Ethan's hands, the warmth of his breath, the weight of his chest against hers. She stared at the ceiling, her heart thudding in guilt. The bedroom was quiet. Daniel had already gone for his morning jog, just like always. Predictable. Disciplined. Detached. She touched her lips, the echo of Ethan's kiss still present. What she had done wasn't just a mistake, it was a fracture. A crack in everything she'd promised to be. And yet, she didn't feel regret. Not yet. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned, barely acknowledging her. She watched him move through the house like a tenant, not a partner, not a husband. He sat at the kitchen table scrolling his phone, oblivious. She thought, would he even care if he knew? Would he fight for me, or just let me go? That night, she dreamt of Ethan's voice whispering her name and woke breathless. Chapter 8, Undeniable. Ethan didn't contact her the next day. It was Sunday, he respected her space. But Madison checked her phone every hour anyway, her fingers itching to message him. Monday morning at the office, they passed each other in the hallway. Their eyes met briefly, nothing was said, but everything was felt. Later, he called her into his office under the pretense of campaign review. The moment the door closed, silence bloomed between them like a secret garden. I didn't mean to complicate your life, Ethan said quietly. It was already complicated, she replied. You just woke me up to it. He stepped closer but didn't touch her. Not yet. I don't want to be an escape for you, Madison. I want to be real. Her breath caught. I don't know how to be real anymore. Yes, you do, he whispered. You just forgot. She reached for him. And once again, the line disappeared. Chapter 9, Daniel Notices. It took Daniel 3 weeks to notice something was off. You've been different, he said one night while they lay in bed, backs turned. Distant. Madison didn't respond at first. She considered lying, denying, deflecting. But she didn't. I've felt invisible, Daniel. For a long time. He turned, confused. What are you talking about? I go to work, I pay the bills, I keep things running. That's not love, she said flatly. That's maintenance. Daniel sat up, suddenly alert. Is there someone else? Madison stared at the ceiling. Her silence was the loudest confirmation she could offer. Daniel stood up, walked to the edge of the bed, then laughed, a cold, shocked laugh. Unbelievable. She turned to him, eyes brimming. Do you even care? He shook his head. You think you're the victim here? I gave you everything. No, she said, her voice trembling. You gave me a house. I needed a partner. Chapter 10, A House Divided. Daniel didn't move out, not at first. After that night, he slept in the guest room. The house grew quieter than ever. They barely spoke. Madison stopped cooking dinner. Daniel started coming home later. On paper, they were still married. In practice, they were two people orbiting around a dead star. Madison tried to feel something for him, anger, sadness, guilt, but everything felt muted. Like the light had gone out years ago, and no one had noticed. One night, he passed her in the hallway and said, I loved you, you know. She stopped walking. Then why didn't you show it? She asked. I didn't know how, he muttered, and disappeared into the spare room. Chapter 11, More Than a Secret. At work, things with Ethan deepened. It wasn't just physical anymore. They stayed late just to talk. She told him about her childhood, her dreams of becoming an illustrator, how she once wanted to start her own studio. He shared stories of his divorce, his father's death, and how success had left him lonelier than failure ever did. One evening he said, You make me believe in connection again. And she believed him. But secrets grow heavy, even when they're sweet. Madison started withdrawing from friends. She lied to her sister about her marriage. Lied to herself about where this was going. She knew she couldn't live like this forever. You deserve more than stolen hours, Ethan told her softly after one of their nights together. I know, she whispered. But I'm scared of what comes next. Chapter 12, The Choice. On a cold Thursday morning, Madison filed for a trial separation. She didn't tell Ethan yet. It wasn't for him, it was for her. She needed to know she could stand on her own before stepping into anyone else's arms. When she told Daniel, he barely flinched. Do what you have to do, he said, voice flat. I'm not leaving for him, she said. I'm leaving for me. Daniel nodded. You've already left. This is just paperwork. As she packed her suitcase 2 days later, she found her wedding photo tucked in the back of her dresser. She stared at it for a moment, two young people full of hope, unaware of how far they'd drift. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The hardest part was over. Chapter 13, New Beginnings. Madison moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of downtown. It wasn't luxurious, but it was hers. No marble countertops. No shared closets. Just peace. The first night alone, she didn't sleep much. The silence was different, lonely, but honest. She didn't call Ethan. She needed space to breathe. Instead, she sat on the floor with a glass of wine, sketchpad in her lap. For the first time in years, she drew something for herself, raw, imperfect lines full of emotion. Her art, like her life, was finally hers again. Chapter 14, What Love Feels Like. A week later, Ethan texted. Ethan, how are you holding up? Madison, figuring it out. Slowly. Ethan, can I see you? Just dinner. No pressure. She said yes. They met at a quiet Italian place near her new apartment. Madison wore a soft blue sweater and no wedding ring. When Ethan saw her, he smiled, but not in the way men smile at women. He smiled like someone who had missed a piece of themselves. They talked for hours, the conversation free of guilt. She told him about the apartment. He told her he missed her, but he was proud she took time to find herself. As they left the restaurant, he took her hand for the first time in public. And it didn't feel like a betrayal anymore. It felt like possibility. Chapter 15, Daniel's Farewell. Daniel reached out one Saturday morning, asking to meet. Madison agreed. There were still things unspoken. They met at a quiet park halfway between her apartment and the old house. Daniel looked thinner, older, like life had finally caught up with him. I wanted to say I'm sorry, he said. Not for everything, but for not seeing you sooner. I'm sorry too, she said. For hurting you. That was never the plan. He nodded. I think we were holding on to something that stopped being real years ago. She looked at him, really looked, and saw a man trying to let go. I hope you find peace, Daniel, she said. He smiled softly. I hope you find love that doesn't make you question yourself. As he walked away, Madison felt the weight lift, not because he left, but because they both finally accepted it was over. Chapter 16, Building Something New. Madison started spending more time with Ethan, but this time, it felt real. No more hiding, no more rush moments behind closed doors. They went to art exhibits, farmers' markets, and long drives to nowhere. Their conversations deepened, not just about the past but about the future. I want a life with you, Ethan said one night on her couch, his arm draped around her. Madison looked at him, then down at her sketchpad where she had been drawing a concept for her own design studio. And I want a life where I'm free to grow, she said. He didn't flinch. Then we'll grow together. I'll never dim your light. She smiled, her chest warm. It was the first time someone had said that and meant it. Chapter 17, Shades of Forgiveness. It had been over a month since she'd seen Daniel, but one day, she received an envelope in the mail. Inside was the final paperwork for the divorce, and a short handwritten note. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. I hope you find joy. D. Madison sat in silence for a long time after reading it. She didn't cry. She didn't feel regret. Just a gentle, unexpected wave of closure. She signed the papers and mailed them the next day. Chapter 18: The Studio. By spring, Madison had rented a small, sunlit space to start her own design business. She called it Sketch and Soul. Ethan helped her set up furniture, paint the walls, and install her first hanging sign. He never tried to control or direct, he simply supported. You created this, he said on opening day. From nothing. You should be proud. Madison stood at the entrance, watching people admire her work, and felt something she hadn't felt in years, whole. Later that night, as they walked home, she turned to him and said, You didn't save me, Ethan. I saved myself. He smiled. I know. I just didn't want you to feel alone while doing it. And for the first time, Madison believed that love didn't have to come with pain. It could simply be a safe place to land. Chapter 19: Old Ghosts, New Strength. Madison's new life wasn't without its challenges. Clients backed out. Her savings ran low. Some nights she questioned if she was dreaming too big. But she kept going. Every doubt, every obstacle, she met it with stubborn hope. One afternoon, while cleaning out old boxes in her studio, she found a dusty journal from 5 years ago. The first page read, One day, I want to matter to myself. She smiled, closed it, and placed it on her new bookshelf. That night she told Ethan, I never knew how strong I was until I had to be. He kissed her forehead. And you've only just started. Chapter 20: Daniel's Final Word. 3 months later, Madison received a call from Daniel. His voice was calm, almost reflective. I'm moving to Chicago. Got a new job. A fresh start. She was silent for a moment. Good for you. I'm glad you left when you did, he said. I didn't understand it then, but now I do. We were stuck. We were scared, she corrected gently. Yeah, he agreed. But I think you were brave first. That evening, Madison told Ethan about the call. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you stayed? He asked. She thought about it. I wouldn't have become myself. That's the truth. Chapter 21: A Proposal Without a Ring. 6 months into their relationship, Ethan invited Madison to a quiet rooftop dinner overlooking the city skyline. Candles flickered in the breeze. Jazz played softly from a speaker. After dessert, he looked at her seriously. I don't want to rush you. But I want to ask something, not with a ring, not yet. Just a promise. Madison raised an eyebrow. A promise that we'll build something, together. That we'll keep choosing each other, even when it gets messy. She took a deep breath, heart full. I can promise that, she said. Because for the first time in my life, I feel chosen too. Chapter 22: 1 year later. A year had passed since Madison walked out of her old life. Her studio, Sketch and Soul, had grown, slowly but steadily. She'd hired a part-time assistant. Landed a branding contract with a small fashion label. She stood one morning at the window of her studio, watching the rain blur the streets, and realized she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. When Ethan arrived to take her to lunch, he paused in the doorway. You look like someone who finally believes she deserves good things. She smiled. I think I do. They kissed, unhurried and sure, like people who had nothing left to hide. Chapter 23: Facing the Past. At her sister Rachel's urging, Madison agreed to come home for their father's 60th birthday. She hadn't seen most of her family since the separation and divorce. Whispers had gone around. Judgments had been made. She expected cold shoulders. What she didn't expect was her mother pulling her aside in the kitchen. I didn't understand your choices, her mother said. Still don't. But I see your eyes now, and they're not empty like they were. Madison felt her throat tighten. I never meant to hurt anyone. I know, her mother said. But you stopped hurting yourself. That counts for something. At the dinner table, Rachel nudged her and smiled. You look happy. Madison smiled back. I am. Chapter 24. Love Without Chains. Ethan didn't propose with a ring, not that year. They weren't in a rush. Madison was building her life brick by brick, and he stood beside her, not in front, not behind. They made dinner together. Took road trips with no destination. Supported each other without asking for permission to grow. One evening, after a gallery show that featured her newest design work, Ethan pulled her into his arms and said, You realize you're living the life you used to only draw in notebooks. She laughed. That's the point, isn't it? Create it. Then live it. He kissed her then. Deep and slow. Not a kiss of passion, but of peace. Chapter 25. The Test. Every relationship faces a test, and Madison and Ethan's came in the form of an offer. A major advertising firm in New York City reached out to Ethan with a creative director position. High salary. Prestige. Influence. He told Madison the night he received the call. You should take it, she said quickly, trying to sound supportive. But Ethan studied her closely. You're not asking me to stay? She paused, searching her heart. I don't want to hold you back. Not like someone once held me back. Ethan took her hand. I don't want New York without you. But I won't ask you to give up your studio. Madison's heart squeezed. Then maybe we don't have to choose. Maybe we build something that lets us both keep growing. It wasn't a decision, they agreed it was a plan. Chapter 26. The Balance. In the months that followed, Ethan turned down the full-time position and negotiated a remote consultant role. It meant less money, but more flexibility, and no relocation. Madison expanded her studio, taking on 2 more clients and mentoring a young designer fresh out of art school. Her days were long, but fulfilling. They weren't perfect. There were arguments about time, work, exhaustion, but none about love. Every Sunday, they made pancakes and reviewed their calendars together. Every Friday night, they shut the laptops off and opened a bottle of wine, promising each other one night of just being. Love didn't need to be dramatic or painful, it just needed to be chosen. Over and over again. Chapter 27. The Question. On a quiet evening in late spring, Madison returned home to find their apartment lit with soft candles. Ethan had made dinner, lemon chicken, her favorite. After dessert, he handed her a sketchbook wrapped in brown paper. She opened it, confused. Inside were drawings, her drawings, cut out and carefully mounted. Her first logo sketch. A doodle from their first meeting. The napkin where she had scribbled the name. Sketch and Soul. At the end of the book was a blank page with one sentence. Marry me, if it feels like home. Madison looked up, tears already in her eyes. She didn't say yes. She whispered, I am home, and pulled him into her arms. Chapter 28. The Wedding. They didn't plan a grand ceremony. No church aisles, no ballroom. Madison and Ethan married in the backyard of their new home, surrounded by close friends, string lights, wildflowers, and the sound of laughter. Madison wore a simple ivory dress with a hand-painted design along the hem. Ethan wore a dark gray suit and couldn't stop smiling. Her sister Rachel cried during the vows. Madison didn't. She felt peaceful. Her vows were short but full. I'm not promising to be perfect. But I promise to never disappear. I promise to speak, to show up, to grow, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Ethan whispered back. And I promise to make space for you to be exactly who you are. When they kissed, the wind shifted, like the world gave them its quiet blessing. Chapter 29. Years later. 3 years passed. Madison's studio flourished, expanding into branding and packaging design. She took on interns. Mentored young women in design. Launched a course online. Ethan's consulting brought in major clients, but he stayed local. No more chasing ladders, just building something meaningful. They bought a small lake cabin and spent weekends there, sketching, cooking, talking about nothing. Sometimes Madison still woke in the middle of the night and stared at the ceiling, just like she used to in that old suburban home. But this time, it wasn't emptiness she felt. It was presence. Love didn't rescue her. She rescued herself. But love, real love, met her on the other side. Chapter 30, Full Circle. On her 40th birthday, Madison stood in her studio, surrounded by art, clients, laughter, and her husband beside her. Rachel gave a toast. Her mother hugged her tightly. Even Daniel had sent a card, wishing her well. That night, after everyone had left, Madison sat on her couch, sketchpad in her lap, just like the old days. She drew a house, not a physical one, but a symbol. A place where she had finally arrived. Ethan walked in and kissed the top of her head. "Still drawing?" "Always," she whispered. He smiled. "Then we're going to be just fine." And they were. The end.